This is my true story. I worked my whole life to build a good name, to be respected by neighbors and trusted by family. I thought my son would honor that, but instead, he stole money from the neighbors and blamed me. Overnight, I went from being trusted to being treated like a thief. The shame nearly broke me, but what he forgot was that I still controlled his fortune, and I was not powerless. What I did next left him with nothing. Before I tell you, comment where you're watching from and what time it is, and please subscribe. All my life I carried the weight of responsibility, not just for myself, but for my family. I woke before the sun, worked until my body ached, and laid down at night with the satisfaction that at least my family was fed, clothed, and safe. I was never a rich man in my youth, but I was honest. That honesty was my shield, and I believed it was also my gift to my children. I thought if I gave them a clean name, a respected place in the community, they would carry it forward proudly. I remember the long years of labor. My hands were hardened by tools, my back bent from carrying loads too heavy for one man. I worked in the fields, I worked in shops, I worked wherever work could be found. Sometimes it was hauling wood, sometimes it was digging ditches, sometimes it was mending fences in the biting cold. I never chose easy jobs because easy jobs did not feed a family. Hard work was my companion, and sacrifice was my friend. When my son was born, I looked at his small face and made a vow. I told myself that he would never know hunger the way I once did. He would never go to bed wondering if there would be bread in the morning. He would never sit in the dark because there was no money for oil. I would make sure his life was better than mine. That vow carried me through the hardest days. When my body begged me to stop, when my stomach growled from missed meals, when my eyes closed from exhaustion, I kept working because I thought of him. I paid for his schooling, even when it meant I went without new shoes for another year. I gave him money for books, for clothes, for the things children need to stand proudly among their peers. I wanted him to walk with confidence, not shame. I wanted him to be educated, to be respected, to stand on my shoulders and reach higher than I ever could. When he grew older, I helped him start his business. I gave him money from my savings, the money I had stored coin by coin, bill by bill, over the decades. I signed my name on papers for loans, promising that if he failed, I would cover his debts. And when debts came, as they often do in life, I paid them. I paid them with sweat, with labor, with the small savings I had left. I told myself it was not a burden. It was my duty. Fathers are meant to sacrifice for their children. Neighbors respected me. They saw me working, always working, and they trusted me because I never cheated anyone. If someone needed help, I gave it. If someone needed to borrow, I lent. If someone needed advice, I listened. My word carried weight in our community. And I thought one day, my son would carry that same weight, that same respect, because of what I had given him. I thought he would hold his head high, not just because of what he achieved, but because of the foundation I built for him. Every step I took was for him. Every callus on my hands was for him. Every gray hair on my head was for him. I believed in him more than I believed in myself. And I thought when I grew old, when my strength faded, he would remember. He would honor my name, protect my dignity, and show the same loyalty I had given him all his life. But I was wrong. The first signs of dishonor did not come like thunder. They came like small cracks in a wall, tiny at first, but spreading with time until the whole structure is weak. It began with whispers. Neighbors who once greeted me warmly now spoke in hushed voices when I passed. Their eyes, once full of trust, carried a hint of doubt. I noticed the change, but I did not understand it. At first, I thought it was only my imagination, the fear of an old man too sensitive about respect. But then the whispers grew louder, and I could no longer ignore them. They spoke of money gone missing, small amounts at first, then larger. They spoke of hands that could not be trusted, of someone taking what was not theirs. I dismissed it in my mind. I told myself that my family was not part of it. I told myself my son would never stoop so low. He had been given too much, raised with too much sacrifice, supported with too much love to ever betray that. I defended him in my heart before anyone had even accused him. But the looks from the neighbors grew heavier. When I walked to the market, I felt their eyes follow me. When I tried to speak, their replies were shorter, colder, less warm than before. Something was changing in the air, and I could feel it pressing down on me. Respect, once my armor, was slipping away, replaced by suspicion I could not explain. I asked my son about the whispers once. He laughed and told me not to worry. He said neighbors always talked, always made up stories. His words were smooth, his face calm, but something in his eyes made me uneasy. I wanted to believe him. So I did. A father's love is blind, and mine was blinded completely. I thought his laugh was proof of innocence. In truth, it was only arrogance. The whispers became stories. Stories became questions. Questions became accusations. People who once trusted me with their coins, their savings, their respect, began to pull away. They no longer asked me for help. They no longer sat with me to share their troubles. I could feel the walls of trust crumbling around me, and I did not know why. Inside, I began to fear. Fear not for myself, but for my name. I had spent a lifetime building it, one honest act at a time. And now, it was slipping away like sand through my fingers. I did not know then that the cause of it all was living under my own roof, smiling at me with the face of a son. The first signs of dishonor were not the thefts themselves. They were the lies that covered them, the silence that allowed them to grow, and the whispers that poisoned the air. And though I tried to push the thoughts away, deep down, my heart began to suspect what my mind refused to believe. My own blood might be the hand behind the shame. The day of discovery came like a knife to my heart. I remember it clearly, every detail burned into my memory. A neighbor arrived at my door, his face red with anger, his hands shaking as he held a paper. He accused me directly. He said money had been stolen, not once, not twice, but many times. He said people in the community were whispering my name, saying the old man had finally lost his honesty, that the years had made me desperate, that I had taken what was not mine. His words cut deeper than any wound because my honor was the one thing I thought no one could take away. I tried to defend myself. I told him I had not taken anything, that I had no reason to steal. I reminded him of the years I had helped, the times I had lent money without interest, the times I had given food when others went hungry. But he did not believe me. His eyes carried doubt, his voice carried rage. And then he said something that broke me completely. He said, "Your own son told us." He said you must have done it. The world stopped in that moment. My own son, the boy I raised, the boy I gave everything for, the boy who ate the bread I earned with my sweat. He was the one who had pointed at me, the one who had spread the lie, the one who had covered his crime with my name. My knees went weak. My chest felt like it had been struck by a hammer. I could not breathe, could not speak. I could only stare at the neighbor's face and hear the words repeat in my mind. Your own son told us. Later that day, I confronted him. My voice was trembling, my hands shaking. I asked him if it was true. And without shame, without guilt, he smirked and shrugged. He said nothing to deny it. He let the silence confirm everything. His eyes, once innocent, now looked at me with arrogance. He had stolen from the neighbors, and instead of confessing, he had laid the blame on me, the man who built his future. The discovery crushed me. I felt like my entire life's work had been shattered in an instant. Not only was I accused of something I did not do, but the accusation came from my own blood. I thought of all the nights I stayed awake working so he could sleep peacefully. I thought of the mornings I skipped meals so he could eat more. I thought of the money I spent on his education, his debts, his dreams. And in return, he gave me shame. He gave me betrayal. He gave me lies that turned my community against me. That was the day I realized the depth of his dishonor. It was not only the theft, it was the betrayal of trust, the sacrifice of his father's name to protect himself. He did not just steal money, he stole my dignity. And for that, I knew I could never forgive him. The days after the discovery were the hardest of my life. I could not step outside without feeling the weight of 100 eyes on me. The neighbors I once helped, The people who once trusted me with their savings now looked at me as if I was a thief. Their whispers followed me like shadows. Some did not whisper at all. They spoke openly, asking how I could have done such a thing, how I could betray the community that had always respected me. Their words pierced me deeper than knives. I walked to the market one morning, hoping the fresh air would ease my chest, but instead it crushed me further. People pulled away as I passed. Some turned their backs. Others pointed. Children who once smiled at me now clung to their mothers, as if I was dangerous. I, the man who had carried food to families in need, was now treated as a criminal. The shame was unbearable. And my son? He said nothing. He stood silent while the neighbors accused me. He let me carry the weight of his crime. When they came to the house demanding answers, he lowered his eyes and let them scold me. When they shouted that I was dishonest, he did not defend me. His silence was louder than any words. It told the whole community that I was guilty, even when I was not. I remembered the times I had lent money to those same neighbors without asking for it back. I remembered the nights I gave bread from my own table so they would not starve. I remembered the years I guarded my name like treasure, making sure it was clean, making sure it was strong, making sure it was respected. And now, in my old age, my own son had thrown mud on it, and the whole village believed the dirt instead of the truth. I sat alone in my room, staring at the walls, my hands shaking with anger and despair. My heart ached not only from the humiliation, but from the betrayal that caused it. It is one thing to be accused by strangers. It is another thing entirely to be accused because your own blood points the finger at you. I thought of the boy I raised, the boy I carried on my shoulders, the boy I trusted with everything, and I asked myself, how could he do this? How could he let me suffer like this? The humiliation did not end in the market. It followed me everywhere. When I walked to the well, people avoided me. When I sat on the porch, neighbors whispered across the fence. When I went to the prayer house, eyes glared at me instead of bowing in peace. I felt stripped of everything, my dignity, my respect, my place in the community. And all the while, my son walked freely, pretending his hands were clean while mine were made dirty. That was the deepest wound. Not the whispers, not the accusations, but the silence of the one who should have defended me. My son had chosen to save himself by burning my name to ashes. And the ashes fell on me every time I walked outside. In the middle of all that humiliation, as I sat alone in silence, a thought began to grow inside me. My son believed he had won. He believed that by pointing at me, by letting me take the blame, he had saved himself. He believed his youth, his arrogance, his charm would protect him. He believed I was powerless, too old, too broken, too weak to fight back. But he had forgotten something. He had forgotten that while he had stained my name with lies, I still held something stronger than his words. I held his fortune in my hands. Everything he owned, every account, every investment, every piece of wealth that he bragged about, existed because of me. I had helped him open those accounts. I had signed papers when he was too young to qualify. I had deposited money when he had nothing. I had guided him through business, bailed him out of debts, and made sure he stood tall when the world tried to knock him down. Without me, his bank cards would have been worthless pieces of plastic. Without me, his accounts would have been empty lines on a page. He had built nothing on his own, and he had forgotten that. I sat there and thought about every coin I had given him, every time I went without so he could have more. Every time I pulled money from my own pocket to cover his mistakes. I thought of the hours I worked, the sweat I poured into building not just a life for me, but a future for him. And then I thought of the moment he stood silently while neighbors called me a thief. My stomach turned, my chest tightened, but my mind grew sharper. If he could steal my dignity, then I could strip him of his fortune. He believed age made me powerless. He believed silence meant defeat. But I knew something he did not. Silence can also mean strategy. Age can also mean patience. And weakness can be turned into strength when the truth is on your side. As I thought about it, I realized the balance of power was not what he imagined. He had youth, but I had experience. He had lies, but I had control. He had arrogance, but I had the law. The money he flaunted, The wealth he believed was his shield was nothing more than a gift I had given him, and a gift can always be taken back. He forgot the simplest truth. I was the one who built the foundation. He was only standing because I lifted him, and if I stepped away, he would fall. That night, after another long day of humiliation, I sat alone at the small table in my room. The house was quiet, but inside my head there was a storm. I could still hear the voices of the neighbors calling me a thief. I could still feel the stares that cut into me when I walked past them. I could still see my son standing silent while I carried the weight of his crime. My heart ached, my chest was heavy, and my eyes burned. For hours, I sat there, staring at the wall, thinking of everything I had given and everything I had lost. I asked myself over and over, how could he do this? How could he throw his father into the fire to save himself? How could the boy I carried on my shoulders, the boy I fed from my own hands, the boy I protected from the harshness of the world, turn around and betray me so coldly? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. He had no respect left for me. To him, I was not a father. I was not a man who had sacrificed for him. I was just an old scapegoat, someone he could use to cover his own sins. The pain was deep, but slowly, it turned into something else. It turned into resolve. I realized that if I sat quietly and did nothing, I would spend the rest of my days drowning in shame that did not belong to me. My son had stolen from the neighbors, but worse, he had stolen my dignity. And dignity is worth more than money, more than property, more than anything. If he could take that from me, then I had the right to take from him what he valued most, his fortune. So I made my decision. I would no longer sit silent. I would no longer allow him to laugh while I carried his guilt. I would no longer play the part of a powerless old man. I still held control over his accounts, over his assets, over the fortune he believed was untouchable. I had the numbers memorized, the papers in my possession, the legal power in my name, and I decided I would use it. That night, I did not sleep. I planned. I thought through every step carefully. I knew that if I acted in anger, it would be reckless. But if I acted with precision, it would be final. He would never recover from it. I whispered to myself again and again, if he can make me carry guilt, I will make him carry nothing. When the morning came, my mind was clear. My body was weak, but my spirit was firm. The decision was made. I would take everything back. The next morning, I rose with purpose. My legs were stiff. My back was sore, but my heart was steady. I put on my old coat, the same one I had worn through years of labor, and I walked toward the bank. Each step was heavy, but each step carried the weight of justice. I remembered every insult, every whisper, every moment of shame that had been forced onto me, and with every memory, my resolve grew stronger. When I entered the bank, the air was cool and the room was quiet. I walked to the counter slowly, but my voice did not shake when I spoke. I told the clerk my name. I gave them the account numbers. Numbers I had memorized long ago, numbers that tied every cent of my son's fortune back to me. They looked at the papers, checked the records, and nodded. My authority was still there. My oversight was still legal. My son had forgotten that I still had control, but the law had not. I signed the documents. My hands trembled. Not from weakness, but from the weight of the moment. With each stroke of the pen, I was stripping him of the wealth he thought he owned. Savings accounts, emptied. Investment accounts, closed. Business funds, transferred. One by one, I took back what I had given. The money flowed into accounts under my name, accounts he could never touch again. As I sat there, finishing the last signature, I felt a strange calm. This was not revenge born of anger. It was justice born of betrayal. He had stolen my dignity, so I took his fortune. He had left me with shame, so I left him with emptiness. The clerk handed me the final confirmation. The accounts that once carried his pride were now nothing but dust. I folded the papers carefully, placed them in my pocket, and walked out of the bank with slow, steady steps. The sun was brighter that morning. The air felt lighter, and for the first time since the accusations began, I breathed without the weight of humiliation pressing down on me. I did not run. I did not boast. I simply carried on with quiet resolve. My son would discover soon enough what had happened, and when he did, he would understand what it meant to betray a father who still held the strings. The news of what I had done reached my son faster than I expected. That evening, he came storming into the house, his face red with rage, his hands clenched into fists. He slammed his wallet on the table, throwing out the empty bank card as if it was proof of his pain. His voice shook the walls as he shouted that his money was gone, every cent drained, every account empty. He screamed that his business was ruined, that his friends would laugh at him, that his life was destroyed. His fury filled the room, but I sat still, silent, watching him break under the weight of his own arrogance. He demanded answers. He pointed his finger at me, just as he had done with the neighbors. He shouted that I must have known, that I must have done it, that I was the reason his fortune had vanished. And this time, he was right. I did not deny it. I looked at him calmly, and for the first time since the lies began, I spoke with a voice steady and clear. I said, "You stole my dignity. I stole your fortune." My words were quiet, but they struck harder than his shouting ever could. He fell silent for a moment, stunned, his eyes wide, his face twisted between shock and disbelief. He tried to laugh, but the laugh cracked into a sob. He begged me to give it back. He said he was sorry. He said he would fix everything. But I knew the truth. He was not sorry for what he had done to me. He was sorry that his pockets were empty. He was sorry that his pride had been stripped. He was sorry that the life he thought was secure had collapsed. Neighbors began to notice the change as well. The same people who once accused me now saw the truth unravel. Whispers spread again, but this time they were not about me. They were about him. They spoke of how his accounts had been emptied, how his lies had been exposed, how the father he betrayed had turned the tables. One by one, the same neighbors who had shamed me began to see me differently. Their eyes softened, their voices grew gentler, and slowly, the weight of guilt began to shift from me back to where it belonged. On him. My son, once arrogant and proud, now walked the streets with lowered eyes. The same friends he bragged to now avoided him. The same people he tried to impress now whispered behind his back. His pride, his wealth, his reputation, all gone. And all because he tried to cover his own crime by throwing me into the fire. I did not gloat. I did not shout. I did not boast of what I had done. I simply carried on with quiet dignity, knowing that justice had been served. The fortune was gone from his hands, and the shame he tried to put on me now rested squarely on him. That was the fallout, the moment he realized the cost of betraying the man who gave him everything. In the days that followed, the storm began to settle, but its damage was clear for all to see. My son, who once walked with pride and arrogance, now moved like a man carrying stones on his back. His voice, once loud and sharp, grew quiet. His steps, once firm, dragged with shame. The fortune he thought would shield him from consequences was gone. The lies he used to bury me had risen against him. The community that once looked at me with suspicion now looked at him with disgust. And the truth, slow and steady, finally came to light. Word spread quickly. People learned that it was my son who had stolen from the neighbors, not me. They whispered about how he had tried to hide his guilt by pointing at his father. They shook their heads, some in pity, some in anger, all in disbelief. Neighbors who once turned their backs on me began to greet me again, some with shame in their eyes, realizing they had judged too quickly. Others came to apologize, their voices soft, their faces red, as they admitted they should have known better. I accepted their words, but deep inside, I carried scars that no apology could heal. The shame of those days would never fully leave me. I could forgive the neighbors for doubting me, but I could not forgive my son for betraying me. His crime was not just theft of money, it was theft of my dignity, theft of my name, theft of the respect I had carried like armor all my life. That was something no amount of time could erase. As for my son, his life collapsed. With no money, no trust, and no reputation, he faced the consequences of his own actions. Friends who once sat at his table now walked away. Business partners who once smiled at him now closed their doors. Even family members kept their distance, unwilling to be tied to his disgrace. He was left standing in the ruins of his own arrogance, and I did nothing to save him. Not out of cruelty, but out of justice. A man must live with the weight of the choices he makes, and his choices had been made. Inside me, a strange peace grew. For the first time in many weeks, I could walk through the village without lowering my eyes. I could look at the neighbors without fear. I could sit on my porch and feel the sun without the sting of shame. The truth had returned to me, and though the scars remained, my dignity was restored. The aftermath was not about revenge. It was about balance. He had tried to bury me under guilt, but I rose again, and he fell into the pit he had dug. That was the justice life gave him, and I accepted it, not with pride, but with calm. In the end, I chose silence over noise. I did not need to shout at my son. I did not need to strike him with my hands. The justice I carried was written in the emptiness of his accounts, in the shame that followed him wherever he went. He had tried to destroy my dignity, but instead I destroyed the false security he built on lies. That was my justice. I packed a small suitcase, just enough for the road ahead. I placed my papers inside, the documents that proved every cent had been transferred, every account emptied. I folded my clothes neatly, tucked away a few photographs, and closed the door behind me. I did not say goodbye. I did not leave a note. I simply walked away from the house where betrayal had grown, leaving behind only silence. I moved to a place far from the whispers, far from the eyes of neighbors, far from the poison of greed. A quiet town where no one knew my story, where no one judged me, where no one carried my name. For the first time in many years, I could eat a meal without shame, sleep without fear, and wake without the weight of lies on my shoulders. My dignity, once stolen, was now restored. My heart, once heavy, was now calm. As for my son, he was left with nothing, no fortune, no trust, no reputation. He carried only the guilt of what he had done and the emptiness of what he had lost. He made me carry shame that was not mine, and in return, I made him carry nothing at all. That was the balance. That was justice. I do not hate him, but I will never forgive him. Some wounds are too deep. Some betrayals cut too sharp. A father can sacrifice everything for his child, but when that child turns and burns the very name that raised him, forgiveness is not possible. My justice was not revenge. It was truth. And truth always wins in the end. Now, I live quietly, far from him, far from the weight of betrayal. My days are simple, my nights are peaceful, and my spirit is free. I carry no riches, but I carry dignity. I carry respect. I carry peace. And that is worth more than all the money he ever dreamed of stealing. My final thought is this. He made me carry his guilt. I made him carry nothing.